Board diversity quotas are not perfect, but they are a necessary first step. In yet another landmark position for ESG investment, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest with a market value of approximately $1.3 trillion, has made its position clear when it comes to board diversity. The fund will not invest in companies that do not have quotas mandating that a minimum of 30% of their board members are women. While this move may prove divisive, one thing cannot be denied. Quotas work where every other regulatory approach to board diversity has failed. Women now make up 26.7% of the population of corporate directors in OECD nations. This figure has slowly increased over the last 2 decades, but is still a paltry figure. There are a few reasons for this. Foremost, conversations about board diversity generally carry undertones of social justice. Namely, we have a moral obligation to seek equity, and to ensure that a board's composition reflects the demographic makeup of the overall population. It is an important argument, but clearly not sufficient to generate a sense of urgency. Boards often counter social justice arguments with claims that they must prioritize merit, in the form of technical expertise and professional experience, as the prevailing principle for direct recruitment and retention. The implication here is that demographic diversity and merit are mutually exclusive, for example, because there is an insufficient pipeline of qualified talent from underrepresented groups. However, there are powerful behavioral and economic arguments for prioritizing board diversity. Diversity improves decision-making. Diversity signals a thorough and effective board nomination process. Firms with a diverse board are less likely to fail in times of intense crisis. Research has shown that high-performing firms tend to have more diverse boards. For example, S&P companies with above-median gender board diversity see a 15% average higher return on equity. When it comes to enforcing board diversity, mandatory quotas are a clear example of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, when it comes to representation, especially of large and easily identified groups such as women, quotas work. They are a clearly defined category, easily measurable, and as a result, willing boards can generally comply. The downside of board quotas is that they apply only to one group at a time. There are so many potentially intersecting demographic traits along the axes of ethnicity, age, class, ability, sexuality, and many more, that it is impossible to enforce representation and inclusivity on all fronts. In fact, by solely focusing on coarse-grained factors such as a director's gender, quotas can distract boards from exploring novel ways to be inclusive of marginalized groups that are harder to identify. However, it is worth repeating, board diversity quotas work. They work by definition. If boards are not swayed by the moral and economic arguments for diversity, then it is time for regulators to step in and enforce the issue. To address the double-edged sword issue, it will be critical to think of quotas as an essential, but insufficient first step. Like Norway, France, California, and others, beginning with mandatory quotas for women on boards is a start. There is already significant, yet slow, momentum on this front in many jurisdictions, suggesting that most boards have bought into the value of having more women in the boardroom. Meanwhile, gender quotas can be complemented by a modified comply or explain model to ensure that boards are considering how to improve diversity and representation along other demographic axes. The model would require listed firms to disclose their specific processes and objectives to improve and optimize board diversity, even if their primary recruitment priority is merit. In other words, instead of comply or explain, the model could simply be called explain.